It was one of those rainy evenings in late autumn when my phone buzzed with a call from Jenna, my old college roommate who'd always been the adventurous one, backpacking through Europe on a whim, or quitting jobs to pursue vague dreams of becoming an artist. We hadn't spoken much since graduation, life pulling us in different directions, me settling into a stable routine as a librarian in a quiet suburb, her bouncing between gigs and relationships that never quite stuck. Her voice cracked over the line, explaining how her latest boyfriend had kicked her out after a blowout fight, leaving her with nothing but a duffel bag and a maxed out credit card. No family to turn to since her parents had passed years ago in a car accident she rarely mentioned. I hesitated for a split second, thinking of my cozy two-bedroom apartment, shared only with my two rescue cats, Whiskers and Mittens, who ruled the place with their lazy stretches and midnight zoomies. But compassion won out. "Come over," I said. "You can crash on the couch until you sort things." She arrived soaked and grateful, hugging me tightly at the door, her wet jacket dripping onto the welcome mat as she promised it would just be a week or two while she hunted for a new place. The cats eyed her suspiciously from their perch on the windowsill, tails twitching, but I brushed it off as their usual wariness towards strangers. At first, it was almost fun having company. We'd order takeout and reminisce about dorm pranks like the time we dyed the RA's laundry pink, and she'd help with dishes, laughing as Mittens batted at soap bubbles in the sink. But small cracks appeared early. Jenna started complaining about the couch being lumpy, asking if she could use my bed for just one night, because her back hurt from sleeping wrong. And I'd relent, curling up on the sofa myself to the sound of Whiskers purring nearby. Then came the demands for specific groceries. She was vegan now, apparently, and my fridge staples like milk and eggs grossed her out, so I began stocking almond alternatives and tofu, even though it stretched my budget thin on my modest salary. The cat seemed unsettled too. Mittens hid under the bed more often, and Whiskers stopped his usual, affectionate headbutts. But I chalked it up to the disruption of a new person in their territory. One morning I woke to find Jenna in the kitchen, rummaging through cabinets with a scowl, declaring my coffee undrinkable, and insisting we needed a fancy espresso machine she saw online, hinting I should order it since she was between jobs. I laughed it off awkwardly, brewing a pot anyway, but inside it irked me. Her gratitude seemed to evaporate faster than the steam from my mug. As days turned to weeks, her job search consisted mostly of scrolling social media on my Wi Fi, posting selfies from my living room with captions about fresh starts that conveniently omitted her freeloading status. She began rearranging furniture without asking, claiming the space felt stifling and needed better flow for her creative energy, pushing the cat's scratching post into a corner where they couldn't reach it easily. Whiskers protested by scratching the leg of the coffee table instead, earning a sharp yell from Jenna that made him bolt. I confronted her gently, saying the cats were here first and their routines mattered, but she rolled her eyes, calling them spoiled furballs, and suggesting I crate them during the day so she could focus. My stomach twisted at that. These cats had been my companions through lonely nights after my own breakup years ago, their soft fur absorbing tears I couldn't share with anyone else. Still, I didn't push back hard, not wanting to seem heartless when she had nowhere else. Then came the first real red flag. I came home from work to find Mittens cowering in the closet, a fresh scratch on her nose, and Jenna lounging on the couch with a smug look, admitting she'd swatted the cat for jumping on the counter where she'd left her art supplies out. "It's no big deal," she said. "Animals need discipline." I felt a surge of anger, but swallowed it, tending to Mittens with antibiotic cream and extra treats, whispering apologies into her fur while Jenna complained about the cat hair everywhere ruining her clothes. The demands escalated. She wanted her own key, then access to my streaming accounts, then started using my shampoo and lotions without replacing them, leaving empty bottles in the shower like forgotten promises. My utility bill spiked from her long babs and constant device charging, but when I mentioned splitting costs, she teared up about her financial woes, making me feel guilty for even suggesting it. The cats suffered quietly. Whiskers started over grooming, patches of fur missing from stress, and Mittens avoided the living room altogether, slinking along walls like a shadow. I took them to the vet, who confirmed anxiety likely from environmental changes, prescribing calming treats that cost more than I could comfortably afford. Jenna dismissed it as overreacting, saying cats were resilient and I babied them too much. One evening, after a long shift sorting overdue books, I found her yelling at Whiskers for knocking over a glass of water, chasing him with a rolled up magazine until he hid under the couch, hissing in fear. I snapped then, telling her to stop, that this was their home too, but she turned on me, accusing me of prioritizing dumb animals over a friend in need. The argument simmered down with her fake apologies and promises to be better, but doubt seeded deep. Weeks blurred into months. She landed a part-time barista job, but spent her earnings on takeout and new outfits, never contributing to rent or groceries, always with excuses about saving for her own place. The cat's health declined. Mittens lost weight. Whiskers developed a urinary issue from stress, vet bills piling up like unspoken resentments. I started locking my bedroom door at night, not trusting her around them unsupervised, but she'd bang on it demanding late-night chats or snacks. Friends noticed my exhaustion during rare outings, asking if everything was okay, but I downplayed it, too embarrassed to admit how far I'd let things slide. Then came the breaking point. I returned early from work one day to hear yowls and thuds, bursting in to see Jenna kicking at Mittens for scratching her leg after she'd stepped on the cat's tail. Blood spotted the floor from a claw mark, but it was Jenna's rage that terrified me. Eyes wild, screaming obscenities at the fleeing animal. I grabbed Mittens, shielding her, and ordered Jenna out, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. She laughed bitterly, calling me dramatic, but packed a bag and stormed off to crash with some acquaintance. The silence after was deafening but peaceful. The cats emerged slowly, rubbing against my legs as I cleaned up, vowing never again to let pity override my instincts. Looking back, the signs were there from that first rainy night. Her entitlement masked as vulnerability. But I learned the hard way that helping someone shouldn't cost your own peace, or the well being of those who truly depend on you. The cats recovered over time, fur regrowing, appetites returning, and our little home felt whole again. A reminder that boundaries aren't selfish, they're survival. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet after Jenna stormed out that afternoon. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes every small sound. The hum of the fridge, the distant traffic, seem louder than it should. Mittens crept out from under the couch first, her tail low and ears flat, sniffing the air cautiously before rubbing her face against my ankle with a tentative purr. Whiskers followed more slowly, still limping slightly from where he'd twisted away during the chase, his missing patches of fur stark against his gray coat. I knelt down, scooped them both into my arms, and carried them to the bedroom, locking the door behind us even though no one else was there anymore. We stayed like that for hours, me sitting on the floor with my back against the bed, stroking their fur while they settled into familiar laps, the rhythmic vibration of their purring slowly easing the knot in my chest. I cried then, not loud sobs, but quiet tears that dripped onto Mitten's head as I whispered apologies for letting someone hurt them, for not seeing the danger sooner. The next morning, I changed the locks. The hardware store clerk raised an eyebrow when I asked for a deadbolt upgrade, but I just smiled tightly and paid in cash. Back home, I scrubbed every surface Jenna had touched. The counters where she'd left sticky rings from her endless coffee cups. The couch cushions she'd sprawled across for months. Even the shower drain clogged with her long dyed red hair. The cats watched from a safe distance, Whiskers perched on the windowsill like a sentinel. Mittens curled in the laundry basket among clean towels that still smelled faintly of my detergent instead of her overpowering vanilla body spray. Work became my anchor those first few days, sorting returned books, helping elderly patrons find large print novels, recommending cozy mysteries to stressed out moms. It all felt grounding, normal, a reminder that life outside my apartment continued without drama. But at home, the evidence of her stay lingered in small, irritating ways. A half empty bottle of her expensive face serum left in the medicine cabinet, a pair of mismatched earrings on the dresser that weren't mine, crumbs from her late night snacking wedged between couch cushions. I threw everything out in a single trash bag, tied it tight, and left it by the curb like I was discarding the last remnants of a bad dream. The cats began to reclaim their spaces slowly. Mitten started sleeping on my pillow again, her soft weight a comfort I hadn't realized I'd missed so much. And Whiskers resumed his nightly routine of batting at my feet under the covers, until I lifted the blanket to let him tunnel in. Their appetites returned, too. I bought the expensive wet food they loved, the kind with real tuna chunks, and watched with relief as they ate without hesitation. No more turning away from bowls because stress had killed their hunger. Vet follow ups showed improvement. Whiskers' urinary crystals were dissolving with the new diet and stress reduction. Mittens had gained back the weight she'd lost, her coat shiny again. Each small recovery felt like a victory, proof that removing the source of harm allowed healing to happen naturally. Friends started noticing the change when I met them for coffee after weeks of canceling plans. They commented that I looked rested, less tense, and when I finally admitted what had happened, haltingly at first, embarrassed by how long I'd let it go, they listened without judgment, offering hugs and quiet affirmations that I wasn't weak for trying to help, just human. One friend, Sarah from book club, shared her own story of a cousin who'd overstayed a visit and trashed her place before leaving. Hearing it made me feel less alone, less foolish. I started setting firmer boundaries everywhere, not just with people, but with myself. Saying no to extra shifts at work when I was tired, carving out evenings just for reading and cat cuddles, refusing to feel guilty for prioritizing my own peace. The apartment slowly transformed back into our sanctuary. I rearranged the furniture the way it had been before Jenna's creative flow rearrangements, moved the scratching posts back to their sunny spots by the windows, bought new throw blankets free of her lingering scent. One weekend, I deep cleaned the entire place, washing curtains, shampooing carpets, even repainting the scuffed baseboards where Whiskers had once hidden. The fresh paint smell mixed with lemon cleaner felt like renewal, and when I finished, I sat on the floor with both cats sprawled across me, their warmth seeping into my bones, and realized this was what home should feel like: safe, predictable, filled only with the beings who respected its rules. But echoes of Jenna didn't vanish completely. A few weeks later, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's me. Crashing at a friend's now, but things are rough. Can I borrow $200 for rent? Promise to pay back soon." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, the old guilt rising like bile. Part of me wanted to reply, to help just a little, to prove I wasn't heartless. But then Mittens jumped onto my lap, purring loudly, and Whiskers headbutted my hand, demanding pets. Their trust in me so complete it hurt. I deleted the message without responding, blocked the number, and turned off my phone for the night. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains, the cats already waiting by their empty bowls with expectant stares, and I laughed. A real, light sound that surprised me. I fed them, brewed coffee the way I liked it, strong, no fancy add ins, and sat on the balcony with my mug while they sunbathed on the warm concrete. No demands, no yelling, no chaos, just quiet companionship and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. I started journaling that week, not to dwell on the past, but to document the small joys returning. Whiskers chasing a laser pointer across the floor like he used to, Mittens meeting my stomach with happy paws, the way the apartment smelled like home again instead of someone else's perfume. I wrote about how I'd almost lost that peace by letting pity override instinct, how the cats had suffered because I hadn't protected them sooner, and how their forgiveness, shown in every rub against my legs, every contented sigh, taught me more about grace than any human apology ever could. Months passed in that gentle rhythm. The rainy season came and went. Holidays arrived with just me and the cats sharing a small roast chicken, string lights twinkling on the bookshelf because why not? I adopted a new routine of weekly self care, long baths with no interruptions, books read cover to cover without someone talking over them, evenings spent brushing the cats until their fur gleamed. Friends visited more often, filling the space with laughter instead of tension, and no one ever overstayed. Jenna faded to a cautionary tale I shared only when someone asked why I was so firm about house guests now. The scars she left, the vet bills I'd slowly paid off, the trust I'd had to rebuild with my own animals, served as quiet reminders rather than open wounds. And in the end, the apartment wasn't just a place to live anymore. It was a promise kept to the two creatures who'd loved me unconditionally through it all. A space where demands had no place, and abuse would never be tolerated again. Spring arrived with longer days and the faint scent of jasmine drifting through the open balcony doors, a gentle reminder that seasons change whether we're ready or not. And slowly the apartment began to feel like mine again, in ways it hadn't since Jenna first appeared on my doorstep with her duffel bag and desperate eyes. The cats had fully reclaimed their territory now. Whiskers sprawled across the sun-warmed windowsill every afternoon like he owned the view, his tail flicking lazily at passing birds, while Mittens had taken to napping in the exact center of the bed each night, stretching out so far that I had to curl around her small form just to fit. Her soft snores a lullaby I never tired of hearing. I'd started small rituals to mark the shift, fresh flowers on the kitchen table every Sunday, from the corner market, a new scratching post, taller than the old one so Whiskers could really stretch during his claw sharpening sessions, extra shelves for their toys so the living room no longer looked like a perpetual playpen. Work at the library felt lighter too. I volunteered for the children's story hour again, reading picture books to wide-eyed toddlers while their parents sipped coffee in the back, and the simple joy of tiny hands clapping at the end of each tale reminded me how much goodness still existed in small, ordinary moments. I even began dating again. Not seriously, just coffee meetups with kind people from the apps who didn't mind when I mentioned my two furry roommates up front. And though nothing clicked yet, the act of putting myself out there felt like stretching muscles that had gone stiff from disuse. One afternoon, a coworker, Maya, noticed the new lightness in my step and asked over lunch what had changed. I told her the short version. Old friend overstayed. Things got ugly with the cats. Finally asked her to leave. And she nodded knowingly, sharing how her own sister had once moved in temporarily after a divorce and stayed for 18 months, turning the house into a battlefield of passive-aggressive notes and disappearing groceries. You did the right thing cutting it off, she said. Some people mistake kindness for weakness and keep taking until there's nothing left. Her words settled something inside me, a quiet permission to stop second-guessing every boundary I'd set. Back home that evening, I found a small package waiting at the door. No return address. Just my name scrawled in familiar looping handwriting. Inside was a cheap ceramic cat figurine painted garishly pink, the kind sold at tourist shops, and a folded note. Saw this and thought of your spoiled babies. Miss our late night talks. Hope you're okay. Jay. My first instinct was to toss it straight into the trash, but I hesitated, staring at the ugly little statue with its crossed eyes and lopsided whiskers. Instead, I carried it to the balcony, set it on the railing, and watched Whiskers leap up to sniff it suspiciously before batting it off the edge. It clattered 3 stories down to the alley below and shattered against the pavement. The sound was oddly satisfying. Final. I didn't respond to the note, didn't keep it. I shredded the paper and flushed the pieces, then spent the rest of the night brushing the cats until their fur gleamed under the lamp, talking to them about nothing and everything the way I used to before Jenna filled the space with her constant demands. Summer followed, humid and bright, and I took a week off work to deep clean and reorganize the entire apartment from top to bottom. I donated the couch Jenna had claimed as her throne, too many memories soaked into the fabric, and replaced it with a smaller love seat that fit the room better, and left more floor space for the cats to race across at midnight. I hung sheer curtains that let in light but kept prying eyes out, planted herbs on the windowsill so the kitchen smelled of basil and mint instead of stale takeout containers, and finally fixed the wobbly shelf in the hallway where Mittens liked to perch and watch me come home. Each improvement felt like reclaiming another inch of territory she'd once occupied without permission. The cats thrived in the calm. Whiskers stopped over-grooming entirely, his coat thick and glossy again, and Mittens started playing again, chasing feather toys across the floor with the same kittenish energy she'd had when I first adopted her. I began inviting friends over more regularly, game nights with pizza and board games, quiet dinners where conversation flowed without someone interrupting to complain about the food or the temperature or the annoying way the cats meowed for attention. No one ever asked to stay longer than the evening. No one rearranged my furniture or used my things without asking. The boundaries I'd learned the hard way became second nature, gentle but firm, and people respected them because I respected them first. One sticky August evening, Sarah from book club came over with her new rescue dog, a shy terrier mix named Bean, who trembled at first but slowly relaxed when Whiskers approached cautiously and sniffed noses without hissing. We sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint the sky orange, while Bean curled up between Mittens and me, the four of us forming an unlikely peaceful pack. Sarah laughed when Whiskers climbed onto her lap and began kneading her jeans. Your cats are better roommates than most humans, she said, and I agreed, feeling the truth of it settle deep in my bones. Fall brought cooler nights and the return of cozy blankets, and with them a small but significant shift. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Stopped checking social media to see if Jenna had posted another vague story about toxic people who abandon friends in need. She'd gone quiet online after that last package, her profile set to private or abandoned entirely. And while part of me wondered where she'd landed, whether she was safe, whether she'd learned anything, I no longer felt responsible for finding out. My responsibility ended at my front door. at the safety of the two creatures who'd never once demanded more than food, clean litter, and love. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter on weekends, helping socialize shy cats waiting for forever homes. And every time I watched one of them slowly trust again, rubbing against a stranger's hand, purring for the first time, I thought of Whiskers and Mittens emerging from under the couch that day Jenna left, of how trust, once broken, could be rebuilt with patience and consistency. The shelter work filled a quiet space inside me, a way to give back without opening my home to risk again. By winter, the apartment glowed with string lights and the smell of cinnamon from the tea I brewed each evening. The cats had claimed new favorite spots: the top of the bookshelf for Whiskers, the heated blanket on the armchair for Mittens, and I had claimed mine. A life where kindness didn't mean self sacrifice, where love came without strings or hidden costs. Jenna remained a closed chapter, a lesson etched in vet bills and regrown fur, but the story now belonged to us, the three of us who'd weathered the storm and come out softer, stronger, and utterly at home in the quiet we'd fought to keep. Winter wrapped the city in a damp chill that seeped through the windows despite the new weather stripping I'd installed. But inside the apartment, everything felt warmer than it had in months, the radiator humming steadily while Whiskers and Mittens claimed opposite ends of the new love seat like bookends, their eyes half closed in contentment as I moved quietly around the space, lighting candles that smelled of cedar and clove instead of the artificial vanilla Jenna used to burn until the wick drowned in wax. I'd taken to baking again on Sundays, simple things like shortbread cookies dusted with powdered sugar or banana bread studded with walnuts, the oven warming the kitchen while the cats perched on stools watching every move, tails swishing in anticipation of the occasional crumb that fell to the floor. The routine grounded me, each measured cup of flour and cracked egg a small act of reclaiming control over days that had once felt dictated by someone else's whims and moods. Work at the library picked up with the holiday season. I helped decorate the children's section with paper snowflakes and twinkling lights, read festive stories to groups of bundled up kids whose laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and felt a quiet pride when parents thanked me for making the library feel like a second home during the long evenings. One afternoon, a little girl with braids asked if my cats ever came to work with me. I laughed and told her they preferred napping at home. But the question lingered sweetly, reminding me how much Whiskers and Mittens had become extensions of my identity. Quiet companions who asked for nothing more than consistency and affection. I started carrying photos of them in my wallet again. The one of Whiskers mid-yawn with his tiny fangs showing. Another of Mittens curled in a perfect circle on my pillow. And showed them to coworkers without hesitation. No longer worried that mentioning my pets would invite judgment or demands to borrow them for some photo shoot or overnight stay. The shelter volunteering became a weekly highlight. I'd arrive Saturday mornings with treats and toys, sit on the floor of the cat room, letting timid newcomers approach at their own pace, brushing their coats and speaking softly, until purrs started rumbling from chests that had been silent for too long. Watching a tortoiseshell named Pepper finally accept a head scratch after weeks of hiding reminded me of Mittens emerging from under the couch the day Jenna left. Slow trust rebuilt, one gentle touch at a time, and each small breakthrough felt like proof that healing wasn't linear but possible. Back home, the cats greeted me at the door now, no longer skulking in corners or bolting at sudden movements. Whiskers would weave figure eights around my ankles, while Mittens sat primly on the entry table waiting for her chin scratches, their routines restored and cherished. I'd upgraded their food bowls to wide ceramic ones that prevented whisker fatigue, added a second water fountain because the running water fascinated them, and even bought a window perch with suction cups so they could watch the street below without straining. Every improvement was deliberate, a way of saying out loud that their comfort mattered more than anyone else's convenience. Friends noticed the difference too. Sarah started bringing Bean over more often, the little dog and cats forming a cautious truce that involved shared sunbeams and mutual ignoring. And we'd sit on the floor playing with feather wands while Bean chased his tail in dizzy circles. One evening over mulled wine, she asked if I ever heard from Jenna again after the figurine incident. I told her about the text asking for money, how I deleted it without reply, and she raised her glass in a silent toast to boundaries honored. You protected what was yours, she said simply, and the words landed without drama. Just truth. New Year's Eve came quietly, no big parties, just me, the cats, a bottle of sparkling cider, and a stack of movies we'd paused halfway through months ago, when life felt heavier. I lit the string lights early, dimmed the overheads, and let the cats sprawl across blankets on the floor while I watched old favorites, pausing only to refill their treat puzzle toys, or scratch behind ears that arched into my hand. At midnight, the city fireworks cracked outside, but inside it was peaceful, Whiskers purring on my lap, Mittens tucked against my side, the clock ticking softly toward a year that already felt lighter. January brought a surprise, an email from the shelter director asking if I'd consider fostering a bonded pair of senior cats whose owner had passed away. They were gentle, low energy, and needed a quiet home to spend the remaining time. I hesitated only long enough to check with my own too, introduced slowly through scent swapping and supervised glimpses, then said yes. 2 weeks later, Leo and Luna arrived, a black and white tuxedo Tom with a gentle gaze and a dilute calico queen, who immediately claimed the top of the bookshelf as her throne. The introduction went smoother than expected. Whiskers sniffed curiously, then wandered off to nap. Mittens watched from a distance before offering a slow blink of acceptance. Within days, the four cats had established a new hierarchy, mostly peaceful, with occasional hisses over prime sunspots, and the apartment felt fuller without feeling crowded, the extra purring a soft symphony that filled corners once occupied by tension. I adjusted routines accordingly, more litter boxes, staggered feeding times, extra play sessions so everyone got attention without competition. The seniors brought their own quiet wisdom. Leo would sit beside me during evening reading, resting his head on my knee, while Luna groomed Mittens with maternal precision. drawing soft chirps of contentment from my girl. Caring for them reminded me daily that love expands when given freely, but without obligation. That opening my home on my terms didn't mean losing control. It meant choosing who shared the space. Spring returned with crocuses pushing through sidewalk cracks and longer daylight that coaxed the cats to the balcony doors, noses pressed to glass watching pigeons strut below. I started planning a small renovation. Nothing major, just fresh paint and soft greens and new hardwood flooring that would be easier on aging paws. And saved steadily each paycheck, turning what once went toward Jenna's endless emergencies into investments in our shared future. The shelter asked me to lead a monthly workshop for new volunteers on reading feline body language and recognizing stress signals. I agreed, preparing handouts with photos of my own cats, demonstrating relaxed versus anxious postures, drawing from the hard lessons etched into their fur and my memory. Each session ended with the same message: animals depend on us to notice when something's wrong, to act before small signs become big suffering, to prioritize their well being over human guilt or convenience. Walking home afterward, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement, I'd unlock the door to a chorus of greetings. 4 sets of eyes now, 4 tails raised in welcome, and feel the weight of that responsibility settle comfortably. No longer a burden, but a privilege. Jenna remained a distant echo, a name mentioned rarely and without heat. Whatever path she walked now was hers alone, and mine was here, in the quiet warmth of a home rebuilt. One deliberate choice at a time. Surrounded by creatures who asked only for safety, consistency, and the occasional treat, the apartment no longer carried shadows of demands or raised voices. It held only the soft sounds of contented purring, the gentle thud of paws on floorboards, and the steady certainty that this life ours was protected, cherished, and entirely enough. Summer returned with the kind of thick, humid heat that makes Karachi feel close even though I'm thousands of miles away. The air conditioner humming nonstop while the cats stretched out on the coolest patches of tile floor, bellies up and surrendered to the warmth that seeped through every crack, despite my best efforts to keep the place comfortable. Leo and Luna had settled in so completely that the apartment now carried 4 distinct personalities. Whiskers, still the bold explorer who patrolled windowsills and launched surprise attacks on dangling strings. Mittens, the quiet observer who preferred high perches where she could survey her kingdom without effort. Leo, the gentle ambassador who greeted every visitor with slow blinks and soft chirps. And Luna, the regal matriarch who groomed everyone, including me, whether we wanted it or not. Her rough tongue leaving damp stripes across arms and cheeks, in what I came to accept as her version of affection. Their routines had woven together seamlessly over the months, morning feedings in staggered shifts, so no one felt rushed. Afternoon sunbathing sessions where all 4 claimed different quadrants of the balcony doors. Evening playtime that started with feather toys and ended with exhausted sprawls across the love seat while I read or scrolled through shelter photos on my phone. I'd begun documenting their daily life in a small private Instagram account, not for likes or followers, just for myself. A quiet archive of whisker twitches, mid-yawn close-ups, and the rare moments when all 4 cats managed to share the same blanket without a single hiss. Posting felt like preserving proof that peace could be rebuilt after disruption. That trust returned when given space and consistency. The shelter workshops had grown popular. I now led them twice a month, standing in the cat room with a whiteboard and a handful of treats, teaching new volunteers how to spot dilated pupils as fear rather than curiosity, how a tail held high with a question mark curve meant confidence while a low swish signaled irritation, how to back off when ears flattened sideways. I brought photos of my own 4 to illustrate points. Whiskers mid-pounce showing playful energy, Mittens tucked into a loaf position demonstrating relaxation, Leo approaching with slow steps as an example of cautious greeting, Luna grooming Luna's own paw in contented self-care. Attendees listened intently, some taking furious notes, others sharing their own foster stories. Cats who'd arrived hissing and hiding, but left months later purring in laps. And each session ended with the same quiet encouragement. Notice the small signals, act on them early. Remember that their behavior is communication, not defiance. Walking out into the warm evening air afterward, the city noise wrapping around me like a familiar blanket, I'd feel a steady pride, not loud or showy. Just the calm certainty that I was helping prevent the kind of suffering I'd once allowed in my own home. Back at the apartment, the cats would greet me in their usual chorus. Whiskers trotting ahead to lead the way to the food bowls, Mittens waiting on the entry table for her ritual chin scratch, Leo and Luna emerging from wherever they'd napped to rub against my legs in slow, overlapping figure eights. Dinner became a group affair. I'd cook something simple for myself: stir-fried vegetables with tofu, pasta with fresh basil from the windowsill pots, while they ate their wet food in near silence broken only by the soft crunch of kibble toppers and the occasional contented lick of Whiskers. Afterward, we'd settle into the living room routine. Me on the couch with a book or laptop, cats arranged around me like living throw pillows, the television murmuring low in the background, with nature documentaries that fascinated them almost as much as the laser pointer. One particularly sticky July night, after a long day at the library helping with the summer reading program, I came home to find Luna sitting in the middle of the hallway staring at the front door. When I opened it, she didn't bolt outside as some cats might have. She simply looked up at me with those wise green eyes, gave a single soft chirp, then turned and led me to the kitchen where Whiskers had somehow managed to knock over the treat jar, scattering bits across the floor like confetti. I laughed, really laughed, the sound surprising me with its lightness, and cleaned up while they watched, tails flicking in unison. That small moment crystallized something. These 4 didn't demand, they simply existed alongside me, their needs clear, and met without negotiation or guilt. No one yelled when a glass tipped, no one chased anyone with rolled up paper, no one left empty bottles or sticky counters or cryptic notes asking for money. The apartment stayed clean because I chose to keep it that way. The bills stayed manageable because no one else ran up the water or electricity, with endless showers and device charging. The peace stayed intact because I'd learned to recognize when it was slipping and act before it shattered. Friends visited more freely now. Maya brought her teenage daughter one weekend to meet the famous foster cats, and the girls spent hours sitting cross legged on the floor letting Leo knead her jeans while Luna supervised from the bookshelf. We talked about college applications and future dreams over iced tea, the cats weaving between us like quiet chaperones. And when they left, I felt only warmth, no exhaustion, no resentment at having shared my space. Fall arrived with cooler breezes that coaxed the cats back to their favorite indoor spots. The heated cat bed I'd splurged on during a sale, the sunny patch by the bookshelf where dust motes danced like tiny fairies. I started planning for the holidays early, ordering non toxic poinsettias that wouldn't harm curious paws, stringing lights low enough for viewing but high enough to avoid batting, buying extra blankets so everyone could burrow when the first frost hit. The shelter asked if I'd consider adopting Leo and Luna permanently. Their original paperwork listed them as long term fosters, but after nearly a year of seamless integration, the director thought they'd found their forever home. I didn't hesitate, signed the forms that afternoon, paid the small fee, and came home to tell them they were officially mine, though they'd felt that way for months already. That evening, I opened a bottle of sparkling cider, poured a splash into a shallow dish for each cat as a toast they mostly ignored in favor of their regular water fountain, and sat on the floor surrounded by fur and purrs, feeling the kind of contentment that doesn't need fanfare or witnesses. Jenna remained a ghost I rarely thought of. When she did cross my mind, it was with the same neutral distance I gave to old acquaintances or half remembered dreams. No anger, no pity, just acknowledgement that our paths had diverged and stayed that way. The apartment held only the present, four cats breathing in soft rhythm, the hum of the fridge, the faint scent of basil still lingering from dinner, the steady certainty that this home, this life, was built on choices I'd made deliberately, boundaries I'd held firmly, and love given freely, but never at the cost of safety or sanity. And in that quiet space, with paws kneading my lap and tails draped across my legs, I understood that the greatest gift I'd given them, and myself, was the absence of anyone who would ever again demand more than we could give. Fall deepened into the kind of crisp, golden afternoons that make Karachi's distant monsoon memories feel like another lifetime. The air carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from neighborhood fireplaces, while leaves skittered across the balcony like tiny amber boats on invisible currents. And inside the apartment, the four cats had established a rhythm so predictable it felt almost sacred. Morning light pooling on the hardwood where Leo stretched in slow, deliberate yoga poses. Mittens claiming the exact center of the kitchen rug to supervise breakfast preparations. Whiskers launching calculated leaps from the bookshelf to the windowsill in pursuit of drifting dust motes. Luna presiding over it all from her throne atop the highest perch, with the serene authority of someone who had seen every season and approved of this one most. I'd started waking earlier just to sit with my coffee and watch them move through their morning rituals. The soft click of claws on floorboards and the occasional chirp or trill forming a quiet symphony that drowned out the city noise filtering through the closed windows. The shelter had begun referring more long term fosters my way, cats who needed stability rather than temporary housing. And, after careful introductions, I welcomed a gentle gray tabby named Sage, who arrived with a slight limp from an old injury, and a habit of hiding under furniture until trust was earned. Within weeks, he was joining the evening grooming sessions, allowing Luna to lick his ears while Whiskers batted playfully at his twitching tail. The group expanding without fracturing the peace I'd fought so hard to restore. Work at the library shifted into the quieter winter prep mode, ordering holiday displays, pulling cozy reads for the circulating cart, helping patrons find escape in thick novels as days grew shorter, and I found myself volunteering for extra story hours, reading tales of brave mice and clever foxes to wide eyed children, whose parents thanked me afterward with genuine warmth that no longer felt like something I had to earn through endless accommodation. The workshops continued too, now with a waiting list. I added segments on creating safe multi cat households, demonstrating through photos of my own crew how vertical space, separate feeding stations, and slow scent introductions prevented territory wars before they started, and every time someone nodded in recognition or jotted down a tip, I felt the ripple of that hard won knowledge traveling outward, preventing harm in homes I'd never visit. One overcast Saturday in late October, I came home from the shelter to find Sage and Mittens curled together in the sunbeam on the love seat, paws overlapping in a rare display of cross species affection. And something inside me settled fully. The apartment no longer carried even the faintest echo of raised voices or sudden movements that once sent tails puffing and bodies hiding. I'd replaced the last few items that still subtly reminded me of Jenna's tenure. New bath towels and soft blues instead of the white ones she'd used and left damp on the floor. Fresh throw pillows without the faint vanilla ghost of her body spray. A different brand of litter that didn't clump into the same dusty cloud she used to complain about. Each swap felt like closing another small door, sealing away the period when kindness had meant depletion, rather than mutual respect. Friends filled the space more often now without invitation, feeling like intrusion. Maya hosted a small potluck one Sunday, where everyone brought cat-safe treats, pumpkin puree for digestion, freeze-dried chicken bits for training, and we sat on the floor surrounded by purring bodies, while Bean chased Sage in gentle circles, and Whiskers supervised from above like a tiny referee. Conversation drifted from work, frustrations to weekend plans, to the simple joy of watching animals heal. And when someone asked how I managed four cats in a city apartment, I answered honestly: patience, observation, and never letting guilt override what they needed. No one suggested I take in more strays or lend out space. They simply appreciated the home I'd built, the boundaries that made it possible. Winter arrived with the first real frost glazing the balcony railing, and I invested in heated pads for each cat bed, small luxuries that let Leo's old joints rest easier, and Luna maintain her regal composure even when the radiator clanked unpredictably. The holidays passed quietly but warmly. A small tree decorated with non-breakable ornaments hung high enough to avoid batting paws. String lights draped along shelves where tails couldn't reach. Extra blankets piled for burrowing when the wind howled outside. Christmas morning, I woke to find all 5 cats arranged around me on the bed. Sage tucked against my side, Mittens on my chest, Whiskers at my feet, Leo and Luna flanking my pillow like sentinels. And for a long moment, I simply lay still, breathing in their combined warmth, feeling the steady rise and fall of small chests against mine. No demands waited in the kitchen, no cryptic messages on my phone, no lingering resentment over borrowed things, never returned. I made coffee slowly, fed everyone their holiday treat of warmed, wet food, topped with a sprinkle of catnip, and spent the day reading by the window while they napped in sunbeams that slanted through frost-laced glass. New Year's came and went with the same gentle rhythm. No parties, just a quiet toast with herbal tea, while fireworks popped distantly over the city skyline, the cats undisturbed in their various favorite spots. I started the year with a small but meaningful goal: expand the shelter workshops to include a session for adopters on post adoption adjustment, sharing stories, anonymized, always, of how disruption can look like stress behaviors, and how patience, not punishment, rebuilds security. The first class filled quickly. Participants listened as I showed before and after photos of Sage, hiding under the couch on day 1, sprawled confidently across the love sate by month 3, and nodded when I explained that healing timelines vary but consistency shortens them. Walking home through the cold January air, cheeks flushed from the wind, I unlocked the door to the usual welcoming committee and felt something profound click into place. This life wasn't just recovered from a bad chapter. It had been deliberately shaped into something better because of it. Jenna existed now only as a footnote, a name that surfaced rarely without emotion, like mentioning an old neighbor who moved away years ago. Whatever choices she made after leaving my doorstep were hers to carry. Mine were here. In the soft thud of paws following me to the kitchen, the contented rumble that filled the room when I sat down, the quiet certainty that no one would ever again chase, yell at, or demand from the creatures who had given me their unconditional trust. The apartment held only warmth now, literal from the heaters, figurative from the lives intertwined within its walls. And as February approached with its short gray days, I found myself grateful not just for the peace, but for the hard lessons that had taught me to guard it so fiercely. 4 cats, one small home, endless small moments of ordinary joy. It was more than enough. And for the first time in years, I believed it completely. Spring unfolded slowly that year, the kind of tentative warmth that creeps in after a long Karachi-like winter of gray skies and sudden downpours, coaxing green shoots through the cracked concrete of the balcony planters, while the cats took turns basking in the first real sunlight that poured through the glass doors like spilled honey, their fur glowing in shades of gray, black, white, and tabby as they stretched and rolled in lazy contentment. Sage had become the quiet anchor of the group, his slight limp barely noticeable now after months of gentle play and good food. He preferred sitting beside me during evening reading sessions, resting his chin on my knee while I turned pages, his steady breathing syncing with the soft rustle of paper in a way that felt like silent companionship earned through patience rather than demand. The apartment had evolved into something almost communal yet perfectly balanced. 5 distinct feline personalities coexisting without hierarchy battles, each claiming their preferred territories. Whiskers the high shelves and windowsills for his daring leaps, Mittens the kitchen counter edges for supervision duties, Leo the armchair armrests where he could watch the room like a benevolent king, Luna the top of the bookshelf for regal oversight, and Sage the floor-level sunbeams near the love seat where he could stretch out fully without anyone stepping over him. I'd added more vertical real estate, tall cat trees in every room, wall-mounted shelves creating highways above head height, so space never felt contested, and the result was a household where tails stayed relaxed and ears rarely flattened. The shelter workshops had become a small local institution. I now coordinated a quarterly series that included guest speakers from veterinary behaviorists and longtime fosters, turning the cat adoption room into a classroom where people learn not just how to read feline signals, but how to prevent the subtle erosion of trust that happens when human convenience overrides animal needs. During one session, a young woman shared how her roommate had started disciplining her new kitten with spray bottles and loud noises, mimicking what she'd seen online. And the room went quiet as I explained, calmly, without judgment, how fear-based methods create long-term stress behaviors like hiding, overgrooming, inappropriate elimination, the very things I'd once seen in my own cats when Jenna's temper flared. I showed before and after timelines of Sage's adjustment, photos of him tucked under the couch on arrival, then gradually venturing out, finally curling openly in laps, and the attendees leaned forward, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions. Afterward, the director pulled me aside to say the program had inspired a waiting list for adopter education classes citywide, and while pride flickered through me, it came quietly. No need for applause. Just the knowledge that fewer cats would suffer unnecessary fear because someone had listened. Home remained the true sanctuary. Evenings unfolded in soft routine, now deepened by the presence of 5 rather than 4. I'd started a small ritual of family meeting playtime, spreading out puzzle feeders and interactive toys across the living room floor, so everyone could eat and hunt at their own pace without competition. Then sitting cross-legged in the middle while they orbited me, occasionally pausing to bump heads or offer slow blinks that felt like quiet affirmations of belonging. Whiskers still led the charge with his boundless energy, chasing laser dots until he flopped dramatically on his side. Mittens preferred the feather wand dangled just out of reach so she could demonstrate perfect pounces. Leo and Luna took turns batting at dangling strings with measured dignity. Sage watched at first, then joined in tentative swats that grew bolder each night. The apartment smelled of fresh catnip toys, warm laundry from the heated beds, and the faint herbal notes of the balcony mint that had survived another winter. No sticky counters waited after dinner. No half-used products vanished without explanation. No sudden shouts shattered the calm. Only the gentle sounds of contented chewing, soft thuds of paws, and the occasional contented trill when someone found the perfect sun-warmed spot. Summer arrived with longer days and open balcony doors screened against mosquitoes, letting breezes carry city sounds inside, while the cats monitored passing birds and stray leaves with lazy interest. I took a short leave from the library to attend a regional animal welfare conference, where I presented a condensed version of my workshop series to a room of shelter staff and fosters. Slides showed anonymized case studies, including one heavily redacted version of my own experience with Jenna's escalating aggression toward the cats. And the response was overwhelmingly positive, with several attendees approaching afterward to share similar stories of friends or family who had overstayed and turned entitled, hurting the animals in the process. One woman hugged me after admitting she'd waited too long to set limits with her sister-in-law, fearing she'd seem unkind, and only acted after finding her elderly cat hiding and trembling. Hearing her relief at having finally spoken up echoed my own journey, reminding me that boundaries aren't cruel, they're protective, especially for those who cannot speak for themselves. Back home, the cats greeted me with extra enthusiasm after days away, rubbing, chirping, leading me straight to empty bowls as if to say the routine had been missed. And I spent the rest of the week catching up on cuddles, extra brushing sessions, and slow introductions of new toys ordered during the conference. Fall returned with its familiar amber light, and with it a small but significant milestone. The shelter named their quarterly education series after an anonymous donor, me, though I'd insisted on no recognition, calling it Safe Signals, Building Trust Through Understanding. The first official class under the new name filled within hours, and I stood at the front watching eager faces take seats, feeling the quiet weight of legacy, not fame, but the simple transmission of lessons learned through fur regrown, trust rebuilt, peace reclaimed. The apartment itself had become a living example. 5 cats thriving in harmony. No one ever chased or scolded. No one's comfort sacrificed for another's convenience. Friends dropped by unannounced sometimes, bringing catnip or treats, staying just long enough to enjoy the calm before heading home to their own lives. No one ever hinted at moving in, borrowing space, or expecting more than hospitality extended on my terms. Jenna remained a name without power, a memory stripped of emotion. If she crossed my mind at all, it was with the neutral distance of an old cautionary tale, shared only when someone asked how I learned to foster so successfully. The real story lived here, in the soft weight of sage curled against my side during evening reading, the rhythmic purrs rising from multiple chests, the steady certainty that this home, this family of fur and quiet routines, would never again be asked to accommodate demands that diminished any of us. Seasons would continue turning, cats would age, and perhaps new fosters would arrive. But the foundation remained unshakable. Kindness offered freely, boundaries held firmly, love given without cost to safety or sanity. And in that enduring quiet surrounded by the gentle sounds of breathing and purring, I knew the greatest victory wasn't the absence of conflict, but the presence of peace that no one could ever again threaten or take away. Years slipped by in the gentle, unhurried way that only comes after the storm has long passed, and the sky has cleared for good. The apartment in Karachi's humid embrace now carrying the quiet patina of a home that has weathered seasons, fostered lives, and held firm against every attempt to disrupt its peace. Whiskers, once the fearless acrobat of windowsills and high shelves, had slowed to a dignified saunter, his gray muzzle whitening around the edges, while he preferred long naps in the sunbeam that still slanted across the living room floor each afternoon exactly as it had a decade earlier. Mittens remained the watchful queen of the kitchen rug, though her leaps had gentled into careful steps, and her grooming sessions now included extra time for the arthritis that crept into her joints. Leo and Luna, the seniors who had arrived as fosters and stayed as family, had crossed the rainbow bridge one gentle winter apart. Leo first in his sleep curled against my side, Luna months later after a final regal survey of her domain from the bookshelf perch, leaving behind empty beds that I couldn't bring myself to remove right away, instead filling them with soft blankets for the younger ones to claim when they wanted. Sage, the quiet tabby who had once hidden so thoroughly, had become the steady heartbeat of the household, his limp long forgotten as he padded through rooms offering headbutts and slow blinks to anyone who needed reassurance, human or feline alike. New fosters came and went over the years, shy kittens socialized in safe corners, elderly strays given dignified last months, bonded pairs who needed time to adjust, but none ever stayed permanently again. I had learned the difference between opening my heart and opening my home without limits, and the boundary held without apology. The shelter workshops had evolved into a full certification course, recognized by local veterinary associations. I taught alongside behaviorists now, sharing slides updated with fresh case studies, always anonymized but drawn from the same well of experience. How entitlement disguised as vulnerability can erode trust faster than any claw. How raised voices and sudden movements leave scars deeper than skin. How the quiet act of removal, firm, decisive, compassionate toward the vulnerable, allows healing to begin. Attendees still approached afterward with stories that echoed mine. Roommates who just needed a place for a bit and stayed for years. Friends who borrowed clothes, food, space, affection, until nothing remained to give. Family members who turned gratitude into grievance when limits were finally set. I listened without judgment, offered the same steady advice I had once needed to hear myself. Notice the small signals early, document if necessary, act before resentment hardens. Remember that protecting the dependent ones, whether furred, feathered, scaled, or human, is not selfishness but responsibility. Home remained the unchanging center. The apartment had seen minor renovations over time. Fresh paint and calming greens that reflected the balcony herbs still thriving. Wider doorways for aging paws, extra ramps leading to favorite perches. But the soul of the place stayed constant. Clean counters free of sticky rings, towels always dry and folded, no half-used products vanishing into someone else's bag, no cryptic notes slipped under the door asking for money, or forgiveness, or another chance. The cats who lived here now, Whiskers and Mittens aging gracefully, Sage in his prime, and two new permanent additions. A sleek black kitten named Shadow, rescued from a monsoon drain, and a tortoiseshell named Ember, who had arrived as a foster and simply refused to leave, moved through their days in harmonious routine. Morning feeding still staggered to prevent competition. Evening playtime still ended with everyone sprawled in sun-warmed exhaustion. Night still filled with the soft symphony of purring that rose and fell like gentle waves. Friends visited with their own pets now. Bean long gone, but Sarah's new rescue, a lanky mutt named Pepper, fitting seamlessly into the chaos of multi-species gatherings. And no one ever hinted at overstaying, borrowing, or expecting more than shared laughter and coffee. The library had promoted me to children's programming coordinator. I spent days curating story hours that included cat facts and gentle lessons on kindness to animals. Reading books about brave mice who set boundaries and clever cats who knew when to walk away. Parents thanked me for the messages woven into the tales. And children drew pictures of cats with speech bubbles saying, "This is my space," or "Please be gentle," taping them to the walls until the bulletin board overflowed with small, colorful affirmations. One quiet evening in late autumn, years after Jenna's last message had gone unanswered, I found an old ceramic figurine in the back of a storage box. The pink cat she had sent. Cracked but intact after its fall from the balcony railing all those seasons ago. I carried it to the kitchen, set it on the counter, and watched as Shadow batted at it curiously, then knocked it to the floor where it shattered into harmless pieces. No anger rose. No old guilt stirred. I swept the shards into the dustpan, emptied them into the bin, and turned to find 5 pairs of eyes watching me with calm curiosity. I laughed softly, scratched ears and chins in turn, and felt the final thread of that old chapter dissolve completely. Jenna existed now only as a name without face or feeling, a lesson stripped of power, a story told rarely and only to illustrate what not to allow. The real narrative belonged here, in the soft weight of aging cats on laps, the playful leaps of kittens across floors, the steady purr that filled every quiet corner, the knowledge that this home, this life, had been rebuilt one deliberate choice at a time. Boundaries drawn not out of hardness but out of love for those who could not draw them themselves. Seasons would continue their turn, cats would come and go, friends would visit and leave, but the peace remained unshakable, rooted in the simple truth I had finally learned and never forgotten. Kindness is not endless giving. It is giving what can be given freely, protecting what must be protected, and knowing that the greatest act of care is sometimes saying no, so that yes can mean something real, something safe, something lasting. And in the small apartment in Karachi, surrounded by fur and quiet trust, that truth had become the foundation of everything that mattered. A home where no demand was ever greater than the well being of those who lived within its walls. Where love asked nothing it could not return. And where the soft sounds of contented breathing at night were the only proof needed that the story at last had ended exactly as it should. Whole, peaceful, and entirely ours.